This channel is a collection of stories pulled from the darker corners of the internet, the kind that feel a little too real and a little hard to explain. Some are based on things people claim to have experienced. Others are reconstructed from fragments that probably should have been left alone. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these threads going. Tonight's entries are a little different. Let's begin. This happened to me about 4 years ago when I was living alone in a studio apartment in Seattle. I had just graduated college and moved there for my first real job. The apartment was in an older building, nothing fancy, but it was affordable and in a decent neighborhood. My unit was on the 3rd floor at the end of a long hallway. There were maybe 8 other units on my floor, but I rarely saw my neighbors. Everyone kept to themselves, which I actually preferred at the time since I was still adjusting to living completely alone for the first time. The building had this weird layout where my front door opened directly into my main living space. No entryway or anything, just door, then immediately my kitchen and living area. My bed was in the far corner near the only window. I'm mentioning this because it becomes important later. For the first few months, everything was fine. I got into a routine with work, made a few friends, and started to feel like I was actually adulting successfully. But then things started to feel off in small ways that I kept dismissing. It started with my things being in slightly different places than I remembered leaving them. My coffee mug would be on the right side of the sink instead of the left. A book I was reading would be on my nightstand instead of the coffee table. Small stuff that I convinced myself I was just forgetting about. I have a bad memory anyway, so I didn't think much of it. Then I started noticing my food disappearing faster than it should. I'd buy a carton of milk on Monday, and by Wednesday it would be nearly empty, even though I barely drank any. Same thing with bread, cheese, leftovers. I started to wonder if I was sleepwalking and eating in the middle of the night, which would have been weird since I'd never done that before, but it seemed more logical than any alternative. The thing that really made me start to panic was when I found a sock that wasn't mine in my laundry basket. It was a men's sock, dark blue with a gray toe. I lived alone. I wasn't dating anyone. I hadn't had any visitors in weeks. I stared at that sock for a solid 5 minutes trying to rationalize how it got there. Maybe it was stuck to something I bought at a thrift store. Maybe it came from the shared laundry room downstairs and got mixed in with my stuff. I threw it away and tried not to think about it. About a week after the sock incident, I came home from work around 6 in the evening. Everything seemed normal. I made dinner, watched some Netflix, did my usual nighttime routine. I went to bed around 11. I'm a pretty light sleeper, so I usually wake up if there's any noise. That night, I woke up suddenly around 3 in the morning. I didn't know why at first. The room was dark and quiet. But then I heard it, breathing. Not my breathing. Someone else's breathing. It was coming from inside my apartment. My entire body went ice cold. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just laid there in the dark, listening. The breathing was slow and steady, like someone was standing very still. It sounded like it was coming from near my front door, maybe 10 feet away from my bed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and turn on the lights, but I was paralyzed with fear. What if moving made them realize I was awake? What if they had a weapon? What if there was more than one person? I don't know how long I laid there. It felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Then I heard soft footsteps moving across my floor. Slow, careful steps, like someone trying not to make noise. They were walking toward my kitchen area. I heard my cabinet open, the one where I keep my glasses and mugs. I heard the faucet turn on very quietly, just a trickle of water. Someone was getting a drink of water. In my apartment, in the middle of the night, while I was sleeping. I felt like I was going to throw up. My phone was charging on my nightstand, just a few inches from my hand. Moving as slowly as possible, I reached for it. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost knocked it off the table. I managed to grab it and pull it under my blanket. The brightness was turned all the way down, thank God. I opened my messages and texted my friend Rachel, who lived about 15 minutes away. I just typed help and my address. My fingers were shaking so bad I had to retype it 3 times. I could still hear someone moving around in my kitchen. I heard my fridge open. I heard them pour something, probably the milk I had just bought. They were making themselves at home. Rachel texted back, immediately asking what was wrong. I typed that someone was in my apartment and to call the police. She said she was calling right now and that I should try to get out if I could. But I couldn't. To get to my door, I'd have to walk right past whoever was in my kitchen. I was trapped. A few minutes later, I heard my phone buzz again. Rachel said the police were on their way and to stay quiet and hidden. The person in my kitchen must have finished whatever they were doing because I heard footsteps again. But this time, they were coming toward my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to stay completely still. I felt someone standing next to my bed. I could hear their breathing again, closer now, right above me. I thought I was going to die. I genuinely believed this person was going to kill me. Then I heard the most terrifying sound, a voice, a man's voice, quiet and almost gentle. He said, "I know you're awake." I couldn't help it. I opened my eyes. There was a man standing next to my bed. I couldn't see his face clearly in the dark, but I could see his outline. He was tall, wearing dark clothes. He was just standing there, looking down at me. Before I could scream, I heard pounding on my front door. Loud, aggressive pounding. Someone yelling, "Police, open the door." The man's head snapped toward the sound. Then, without saying anything else, he ran. Not toward the door, but toward my window. He opened it, climbed out onto the fire escape, and disappeared. I heard his footsteps clanging down the metal stairs. The police broke down my door a few seconds later. I was sitting up in bed, shaking and crying. I could barely explain what happened. They searched my apartment and the fire escape, but the man was gone. What they found made everything so much worse. When they checked my apartment more thoroughly, they found evidence that someone had been living in my closet. My closet was one of those older, deeper closets with a door that didn't close properly. I rarely used it because I kept most of my clothes in a dresser. Inside, pushed to the back, they found a blanket, some food wrappers, an empty water bottle, and a few of my things that had gone missing. A book, a sweater, a photo of me and my family. The police said it looked like someone had been coming and going for a while, possibly weeks. They think he had a key or had figured out how to pick my lock. The building manager confirmed that the previous tenant had been evicted and might still have had a copy of the key. They never changed my locks when I moved in. They caught him 2 days later trying to break into another apartment in a building a few blocks away. It was the previous tenant. He'd been evicted for not paying rent, but apparently he'd been mentally unstable for a while. When they searched his new place, they found more of my stuff. Clothes, photos, even my mail. He'd been stalking me. The police told me he'd probably been entering my apartment when I was at work, and sometimes when I was asleep. That thought still makes me sick. I moved out immediately. I couldn't stay there another night. Even now, years later, I'm obsessive about locking my doors and windows. I check my closets and under my bed every single night before I go to sleep. I never feel completely safe in my own home anymore. To the man who is living in my apartment, I hope you get the help you clearly need, but I also hope I never see you again. This happened to my cousin about 6 years ago, and she only told me about it recently. Her name is Amanda, and at the time, she was working as a nurse at a hospital in a small town in Pennsylvania. She worked the night shift, which meant her schedule was completely flipped. She'd sleep during the day and work from 7 at night until 7 in the morning. Because of her schedule, she didn't see her neighbors much. She lived in a small house that she rented at the end of a quiet street. It was a nice area, mostly families and older couples. She felt safe there. Her house had a small front porch, a living room, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a basement she never used because it was unfinished and kind of creepy. She told me she went down there maybe twice the entire time she lived there, both times just to check the water heater. One morning after her shift, she came home exhausted like usual. She showered, made some breakfast, and got into bed around 9 in the morning. She always kept her bedroom door closed and used blackout curtains so she could sleep during the day. She fell asleep pretty quickly. She woke up a few hours later to a sound. It took her a second to figure out what it was. Someone was walking around downstairs. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. She thought maybe she was dreaming or still half asleep. But then she heard a cabinet door close in her kitchen. Her heart started pounding. She grabbed her phone and checked the time. It was almost noon. She lived alone. No one had a key to her house. She sat up in bed, barely breathing, listening. The footsteps continued. She could hear someone moving around her kitchen, opening drawers, opening the fridge. She thought about calling the police, but part of her worried she was overreacting. What if it was the landlord? He'd mentioned needing to check something with the plumbing. Maybe he'd let himself in and forgot to tell her. She decided to go downstairs and check. Looking back, she knows how stupid that was. She opened her bedroom door as quietly as possible and stepped into the hallway. From the top of the stairs, she could see part of her living room. Everything looked normal. The footsteps had stopped. She slowly walked down the stairs, each step creaking under her weight. When she got to the bottom, she looked into the kitchen. No one was there, but the basement door was open. She always kept that door closed. Always. She walked over and looked down the basement stairs. It was dark. She couldn't see anything. She called out, asking if anyone was there. No answer. She turned on the basement light and looked down again. Nothing. Just the unfinished concrete floor and her water heater in the corner. She closed the door, locked it, and convinced herself she must have left it open by mistake. But then she noticed something on her kitchen counter. A glass of water. She hadn't poured a glass of water. She'd gone straight to bed when she got home. The glass was half empty, and there was a wet ring on the counter like it had been sitting there for a while. That's when she called the police. She told them she thought someone had been in her house. They came and searched the entire place, including the basement. They didn't find anyone. They told her there were no signs of forced entry and suggested maybe she'd poured the water and forgotten about it. She knew she hadn't, but she didn't argue. After they left, she checked all her locks and windows. Everything was secure. She tried to sleep but couldn't. She kept hearing noises or thought she was. Every creak made her jump. That night, she went to work like normal. She thought about staying with a friend, but she didn't want to seem paranoid. When she got home the next morning, everything seemed fine. She checked the basement door, still locked. She went to bed feeling a little better. She woke up a few hours later to the same sound. Footsteps. This time they were in the hallway right outside her bedroom door. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just stared at her bedroom door, waiting. The footsteps stopped right outside. She watched the door handle. It started to turn, slowly. She jumped out of bed and screamed. She yelled that she was calling the police. The door handle stopped moving. She heard footsteps running down the stairs, fast this time. Then she heard the basement door slam shut. She called the police again. This time when they came, they found the basement door wide open. She'd locked it. She was sure of it. They went down into the basement and found something that made her blood run cold. In the far corner, hidden behind some old boxes the previous tenant had left, there was a sleeping bag, some food, and a duffel bag full of clothes. Someone had been living in her basement. The police searched the rest of the basement and found a small window near the ceiling that had been pried open from the outside. That's how he'd been getting in and out. They dusted for prints and found several. They matched a man who had a record for burglary and trespassing. He'd been released from prison a few months earlier. They never caught him. He disappeared after that day and never came back. Amanda moved out within a week. She stayed with her parents until she found a new place. She told me she still has nightmares about it, about waking up and hearing someone in her house, about that door handle turning. She said the worst part was knowing he'd been there for weeks, maybe longer, watching her, learning her schedule, sleeping in her basement while she slept upstairs. I think about her story every time I hear a weird noise in my house at night. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we fear in the dark are real. Thanks for listening. If you made it all the way through, I'd be curious to know which story stayed with you the most. Leave a comment and let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these threads going. Until next time, Dark Thread Archives signing off.